Do you love TV shows? We do too. Hello everyone, I'm Jeff.
And I'm Anna, and we're the hosts of We Judge a Show by Its Pilot, a podcast hosted by us, a married couple with an endless love for TV.
Whether you're searching for a new favorite series or ready to revisit an old classic, we're here to guide you through an infinite world of TV shows.
Each episode, we watch and discuss the pilot for shows, while also sharing personal stories that parallel the storyline.
So if you're tired of endlessly scrolling and not sure what to watch next, tune in and let us do the searching for you.
We Judge a Show by Its Pilot. New episodes every Tuesday and Friday, wherever you get your podcasts.
Your new favorite show is just one click away. Hello everyone, welcome back to our pod.
Hello.
Today is a very special day.
Very special.
We are recording on our 7-year wedding anniversary. So
happy anniversary,
happy
boo.
anniversary.
7-year itch.
Yes, 7-year itch.
But as I posted in Facebook, does it mean we already went through it because we're finishing year 7 together and now we're starting year 8? So we've survived it.
I mean, I think regardless, I think we're good. So
yeah.
I'm not concerned with
I
it.
don't have an itch.
I think that's, I'm assuming is probably an outdated term.
Yeah, well, no.
I mean, like people.
Well, no, I think it means like supposedly this is like the test of like you're getting over that newlywed hump and now real life is happening, or like it wasn't happening before.
That's such a random amount of years though.
Right. That's what I've always thought. I was like, why 7?
I feel like the honeymoon for a lot of couples, the honeymoon phase is usually over. It's usually like the first year, right?
Yeah.
Kinda, and that's what it's usually. People are like, "That's people." Okay, it doesn't matter. We're fine.
Yes.
But today was a fun day.
Yes.
We slept in. We were gonna go to IHOP because the day on New Year's Eve, before the day after our wedding, and before we had our reception party at our house, we went and ate at IHOP. I'm assuming you had a gift card, or we just ate there because it was right by.
It was right there, and we didn't want to destroy the kitchen because we were going to destroy it for the party, but I didn't feel like making breakfast.
Right, and we were going to go, but we ended up sleeping in because I worked 14 hours the day before, and you actually slept in longer than me.
Yeah.
I actually woke up before you, which does not happen that often unless I'm going to work.
I need to get back into waking up early, or at least at a decent time. Sleeping until 10:15 cannot happen.
Well,
too much longer. My first travel for work is next Monday, so I got to kind of get back into the groove of things.
We went and saw Nosferatu today, which I must say I really enjoyed.
I liked it. I mean, I thought it was a nice updated version of the whole like Dracula story. Very obviously similar to the Winona Ryder, Keanu Reeves version.
Right.
But, that one is, I mean, it's hard to compare them other than that. So, I mean, I love that 1992 version.
I would have preferred some better casting with Bram Stoker's Dracula. I wasn't a huge fan of Winona Ryder and Keanu Reeves in it. I feel like out of everyone in the cast, they really kind of stuck out to me and didn't really.
Keanu stuck out as like a random.
I just didn't feel like they. No offense to either one of them, because I mean Winona Ryder did Little Women, and that was I didn't have any issues with that, but like. I don't know. It was just I just feel like they didn't fit. I feel like they just picked Winona Ryder because of Tim Burton, and it was like, oh well, we got to get the Tim Burton girl in this movie because it's dark and gloomy. I don't know. I just thought it was a weird casting choice for Winona Ryder. I just didn't enjoy it as much as I think a lot of other people did.
No, I didn't mind it so much.
I was just a huge fan of the book. And
I felt
maybe I just had issues because of that.
Yeah. Okay.
Maybe. I don't know. I
thought Keanu was kind of the sore thumb in that.
I definitely agree with that.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is just I mean, if anyone saw the silent film that was made back in 1922, it's pretty, I mean, it's just a variation of Dracula because they couldn't get the rights to do it back then, and it kind of became its own because they remade it in the 70s, I think. And it was in color, and because the one in the 20s was obviously a silent film. But yeah, the new one, I mean, I didn't, maybe because when I was watching the silent film, there wasn't dialogue and there was just music, and it was all visuals, so it was very creepy, and the guy they picked to play Count Orlok, it was like he was that person, and it was just very. I don't know if you've ever seen like pictures of the original Nosferatu.
I don't think I have.
And they even made a movie called Shadow of the Vampire, which was a fictionalized version of the making of that, where the guy that plays Count Orlok becomes like possessed and like turns into a vampire, something along those lines. And that was with John Malkovich. That was a really good movie. Anyway,
Okay.
So nothing we're talking about today has anything to do with horror or vampires. We just talking about what we did today. But today we are talking about a show that you grew up with, right?
Yes.
You grew up with and you watched a lot. And
yes.
I know you love this show. I remember when we were first coming up with show ideas and different shows, we kind of made like a master list of like our favorite shows, like from birth to present. And one of the first ones you put up was this, and it's The Jeffersons.
I love The Jeffersons.
And I watched it on reruns, and I too really enjoyed this show, but I feel like you have probably a much closer connection to it than I do. I just watched it like every now and then on like TV Land and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
The Jeffersons, A Friend in Need is the name of the pilot, and we're going to get into all of the stuff we always get into. So before we do all that, Anna's going to give us some episode and series information.
All right. The Jeffersons, A Friend in Need. The Jeffersons was an American sitcom that aired on CBS from 1975 to 1985 for 11 seasons with a total of 253 episodes, ranking it at number 18 of the longest running sitcoms in U.S. television history. The show's theme song, Moving On Up, which was written and performed by Janae Dubois, is considered one of the best theme songs of all time. And it's probably one of mine.
It's on every top 10.
Yeah, it's probably in my top 5, maybe even my top 3.
Okay.
I mean, it's just iconic and memorable for me because of just my memories of it growing up. The series was developed by the iconic Norman Lear, and in case you don't remember who he is, Lear was responsible for the most iconic TV comedies of the 70s, including All in the Family, Maude, Sanford and Son, One Day at a Time, and Good Times. His TV shows, while hilarious and heartfelt, were the first to introduce political and social themes to the sitcom format.
Yeah, that's interesting.
The pilot was written by Don Nichol, Michael Ross, Bernie West, Barry Harmon, and Harve Broston, and was directed by Jack Shea. The series is a spinoff of All in the Family. They were George and Wheezy were Ardith and Edith Bunker's neighbors, and they go from the working class neighborhood in Queens, New York, to the Colby East, a luxurious high-rise apartment complex in the Upper East Side of Manhattan. Even though The Jeffersons was a traditional sitcom, it tackled many controversial subjects such as racism, alcoholism, suicide, gun control, interracial marriage, and adult illiteracy.
And so much other stuff. That's just a highlight reel of all the things they covered.
I mean, this is what Norman Lear was famous for. The cast includes Isabel Sanford as the matriarch, Louise Wheezy Jefferson, her husband, George, played by Sherman Hemsley.
Legend.
I love him. Their son, Lionel, played by Mike Evans.
I didn't know they had
two of them.
But then Mike Evans came back.
Yes.
I was reading about that.
George's mother, Olivia, played by Zara Cully. Lionel's girlfriend and neighbor, Jenny Willis, played by Berlinda Tolbert. The Jeffersons' next-door neighbor, Harry Bentley, played by Paul Benedict. The Jeffersons' maid, Florence Johnson, played by Marla Gibbs.
Icon, legend.
And the Jeffersons' other neighbors and Jenny's parents, Tom and Helen Willis, played by Roxy Roker, also known as Lenny Kravitz's mom, and Al Roker's cousin, and Franklin Cover. You can currently watch The Jeffersons on Pluto TV. So let's move it on up.
All right. So you watched this when it originally aired?
Yes.
Do you remember it having like a cultural impact, or was it something that like you didn't realize until
I didn't realize it because I was around 5 or 6 when it started. I remember the topics of All in the Family and the way that Archie Bunker was, and knowing that what he was saying wasn't always very kind or correct. It was and so I didn't realize it at 5 or 6, but later on, obviously in life, by the time it ended, I was in high school, and those were definitely issues that I was becoming aware of in my life, as well as my friends or even in the family. So yes, I will say one of the reasons I did sort of identify with it at the time, and this is going to probably sound insane, was in, I think it was the summer of 1976. My family, we took a trip up the East Coast to Philadelphia, to New York, and to Niagara Falls. It was part of my brother's kind of graduation trip, but it was also our country's bicentennial. And one of my mom's brothers, one of my uncle, lived in a high-rise apartment complex, and I don't know if they still own that apartment. I know that he has since passed away. My aunt, his wife, is still alive, but I don't know if they still own that apartment. But I remember watching the Jeffersons and always imagining that was where my aunt and uncle and my cousins lived. Aww. Because they lived in kind of a similar high-rise apartment. I don't think it was because they were super wealthy or anything, but those were the kind of things that stuck in my mind, because I was like, oh, I wonder if like Tio Rafe and Tio Mariana, if like that's near their apartment complex. So those are the things that I would think of, because I remember going there a couple of times, 1976, and then I went when I was in high school a couple of times. So that was me watching it as a little girl. Yeah,
I'm gonna throw a random question at you.
Okay,
so it's actually a fun question. Okay. Because I'm sure we're gonna get heavy probably in a minute. So, so if we were to quote unquote move on up, say we won the lottery or got some financial fortune,
a windfall of some sort,
what would be, other than like paying off debt and doing all of that, what would be like your first like big spending? What would you like spend it on? What would be like your first splurge?
Well, if I was going to have a splurge of some kind other than like just paying off debt,
yes, that's not a splurge.
I have joked,
being responsible,
right? Well, I have not joked, because I wish we could afford to buy like a condo in Orange Beach.
Okay.
Just ever, for us to go on like a long weekend vacation. I know I'm not a super beach person. I don't know if I've ever talked about that, but I do like going there and hanging out, going to the pool. I do like going to the beach. I mean, I like getting into the ocean and swimming and stuff. I'm not an all day like sit on the beach person.
Yeah, I'm not either.
So I know that might sound insane that I would want that as my option, or maybe like a cabin in the woods, but in a nice woods.
I would want to do like in like Gatlinburg.
Yeah,
or like
not like a crazy, scary in like not near society or anyway.
Right.
The other one would probably be like an around the world cruise or something. I mean, if I had like unlimited funds to like go to the casino each night or something, and us do whatever excursions we wanted to, and do like unlimited dining or whatever that might be.
I would want to do like I've had it mapped out in my brain for like a while of what type of cruise I would want us to do if money was no object. We would do a transatlantic. We would go from like Miami or wherever to Barcelona. And then from Barcelona, we do a Mediterranean cruise.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So from Barcelona to Rome, or Barcelona back to Barcelona, hopefully. And then either do some type of like train, or I was thinking a river cruise, like up through Europe, but I don't know how that works going from south to north on a river cruise. I don't know if
they do them because they have to go back.
So I would want to do that and land somewhere by the UK.
Oh, for sure.
And then do London, and then do Scotland, and then do a train back to Southampton, and then do the Scandinavian cruise.
Okay.
And then, because I was thinking for the Scandinavian cruise, then we do that, and then we go back down to the river cruise.
And then we eventually have to get to Ireland at some point too.
Yes.
I mean, we could do that as part of the like England, Scotland,
Yes.
Ireland, and then hop back.
And then at some point, I would like for us to fly to Iceland.
Yes.
And then we land in Iceland, and then we just decide what to do from there.
Okay. Are we like having clothes and stuff shipped to us? I guess we could have a massive suite on the ship, and then
we could do laundry on the ship.
Okay. I'm just
we've done it. We've done laundry on the ship, like, and we've only done it. We've only been on a ship for 7 days, and we've done laundry. We could do it for however long that would take. So that would be like 2 weeks transatlantic, and then a week, and then it would be like. God, it'd be like 6 weeks. God, so
easy,
awesome.
Babe. Because
so
I was
awesome.
also like, yeah, I mean.
Like 2 months, just disappear to Europe.
Yes.
Easily. Be so awesome. And just be like, hey, no, we saw all of Europe. Like, just be able to say that. Like, we saw all of Europe. That'd be awesome.
Yeah. I'm down.
So yeah, I mean, like it's planning. A splurge. It's a splurge. Like it's not.
I mean, I'm definitely coming up to the time of starting to splurge because, I mean, I traveled a lot with my mom, and this is a story about them being successful. I think you're going to talk about it in the show, the pilot summary, but they come from Queens and moved to Manhattan because his dry cleaner business becomes very successful. Yeah. And so, but I definitely believe in splurging. I mean, but that's why you save as well.
Right.
I mean, we just have had quite a few bills lately that were very unexpected. A few medical bills,
one after the other,
house bills,
after the other.
Then we splurged on having the utility room remodeled a little bit, so that wasn't necessarily unexpected. We planned it, but again, it's a big chunk of money. So during January and February, we're planning for our March trip with Maddie, May her graduation, start of college. And I'm already planning for something in 2026. I don't know what it is yet, but once we get through May, August, I will be in planning mode for something big for us because we will have been saving. So yeah.
So you talked about your family in New York, which is do you remember? How old were you the first time you went to New York?
It was probably that bicentennial trip. So I was probably 7. So that was 7.
Do you have a memory of it?
Yes.
Or any early memory of you going to New York? Because you said you went a few times.
I do. Because we traveled up through Philadelphia because it was the bicentennial.
Right.
We went to see the Liberty Bell and all the place where all the signing and stuff happened for, all of that kind of famous stuff. I'm going to probably say this and it's going to sound really stupid. Where all the National Treasure, the movie stuff happened in Philadelphia that they went to. Then we drove. We were in the family light sky blue Econoline van.
Nice.
That was outfitted by my dad. It came with the 2 seats, the driver and the passenger seat, and then it was totally empty. And then I think my dad put in 3 more seats in the back. And a lot of times we would sit in between the driver and the passenger seat on the Coleman cooler that we would have that was packed with drinks and ice and sandwiches and stuff.
That's awesome.
But then we drove up to New York, and then I think we might have separated. My mom and dad might have stayed, and my brother might have stayed with her uncle is who she grew up with. Her grandparents, we'll talk about this in another episode that we're going to do this month, but my mom did not live with her nuclear family. She was sent to live with her uncle and aunt so that she could go to Catholic school in Ecuador. We'll talk about that soon. So my dad, my brother, and my mom, I think, stayed with them. And then me and my sister went and stayed with her cousin, his son, Napoleon, and our cousins, Ingrid and Gina and Christina. And so, because, there were 5 of us. And then we took one of our tío Enrique, my mom's uncle's sons, with us up to Buffalo to go to Niagara Falls.
I want to go.
I do remember going, I walked up the Statue of Liberty.
That's awesome.
I believe, and I might get this totally wrong, I think the World Trade Center, the towers had just been completed, and I think we went up to the top.
Oh, okay.
I'm fairly positive. I could have that in my memory of another trip though. So I've been to New York City quite a few times, so that could have been like my junior high trip, not that elementary trip. Then when we went to Buffalo to go to Niagara Falls, we did the stuff like Made of the Mist, and we went around the Niagara Falls. And I remember it was one of my early times of loving rainbows. I got a postcard with the Niagara Falls with a rainbow going across it and stuff. So, and if we weren't staying with a relative, we were usually camping. So we camped in Buffalo, and I remember this was the summer of 76, and it was so cold, ice formed on the tents.
Oh, wow.
My dad made me, my sister, my mom, all of us go into the van to sleep because it was so cold. And I think him, my brother, and our cousin sleep in the tent together with like all the rest of like whatever blankets were left over. So the 3 men were in the tent, and the 3 women, we were in the van because it was so cold. So I remember my dad was worried about us being too cold, but that's how cold it was in the summer in Canada.
That's crazy.
Was insane. But I'm trying to really think, like, where did we sleep in Philadelphia? Because we might have gotten a hotel. And that would have been the 5 of us in one room. And my brother was like 17, 18 at the time. So, they might have gotten a cot or something for him, or heck, he might have slept in the van for all I remember. Like my mom and dad in a bed, and then me and my sister in a bed, and then my brother probably volunteered to sleep in the van. Who knows? I don't remember. Maybe I'll have to ask. But yeah, so that was my memory of my very first trip. I remember pizza. My cousins Ingrid and Gina would bring pizza to us, and it was just really good. And so that was my first New York pizza that I had. I remember that. The Statue of Liberty. Did you look up when the World Trade Center opened?
Yeah, it inaugurated in 1973.
Yes, so we did. We went up it then, because I do remember it like being like nervous, because I think, again, this is my like 7-year-old mind trying to remember. Like, I remember you had to take like 2 elevators to go to the top. Like, you went up halfway, and then you had to get out, and there was like a landing lobby, and then you had to go back up again. But I think I went that time, and then maybe in like December of like 1985 was probably the last time as a kid that I went. So again, I've just done a lot of stuff in New York, so all the memories might blend together.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome, though. That's a really sweet story.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so the Jeffersons and all the other Norman Lear shows, like you said in the series description, they tackled a lot of subjects, everything from racism, alcoholism, all of that stuff. It seems like back then, the way it really just seemed like Norman Lear just wanted people to start a conversation.
Yes.
And I feel like the way that they did that, and I feel like the way that a lot of people did it in the 70s, not just Norman Lear, is they did it through comedy. And they kind of had a social commentary, political commentary, however you want to describe it. And I feel like now, people are afraid to have that conversation. Do you feel that way too?
Yes.
Do you feel like people were more afraid to talk about it back then? Or do you think that it's more so now?
I think it's more so now.
Me too.
What's crazy is, so what I wanted to say a little while ago was I was going to try to compare 2 versions of it. So like there was All in the Family, where Archie Bunker was a full-on racist.
Yeah.
He was a bigot. I mean, it was, obviously I didn't know that then. Like, I knew he was this cranky, curmudgeony guy,
right,
and that's how I would have described him. What I didn't know at 5, 6, 7 years old was that he was like a full-on racist, bigoted person.
Yes.
But that's what Norman Lear was showing, was that he was this person who was terrible and hateful, and I don't want to think he was trying to make light of it. He did want to have this conversation about it. They used racial epithets and things like that on the show, slurs, very degrading talk, but it was meant for a purpose.
Right.
Versus something like we saw with Dynasty or Three's Company, where there was racist and misogynistic tones and discussion, but it wasn't really meant to be any conversation starter. It was just thrown into the story with no real purpose other than to be thrown into the story.
To be controversial.
Well, I don't even know if it was meant to be controversial. I think it was just like, it was like the scene in Dynasty where Fallon was talking about the boardmen, and she was like, well, the white men don't want you, or whatever it was. I don't remember the exact scene. I don't think that was meant to be controversial. I think that she was just saying that, and it was something very racist or sexist to whoever they were talking about. Again, I don't remember that whole scene off the top of my head. Whereas Norman Lear, I think, was putting it front and center.
Yes.
That scene was just a one-liner that was part of whatever, like just part of the scene. Where Norman Lear, it was like, this is America.
Oh, yeah.
Like, this is what's happening. This is what's wrong with the country. We should talk about it. This is what your neighbor probably says when you're not around or whatever. And now, today, I think if All in the Family was on TV, like, it wouldn't be on TV.
It wouldn't be on TV.
Like,
the Jeffersons wouldn't even be on TV.
Yeah,
because the very first episode of the Jeffersons, I mean, they're dropping racial slurs.
Yeah.
And it was very it was very alarming, because I'm assuming when I was watching these things on Nick at Night, by that time in the 90s, they had started to censor things.
Oh, okay.
And I mean, I didn't realize how political and how these shows were. I didn't realize that either when I was young and watching it, but then kind of watching it now and then looking back on like certain episodes and thinking about some of these certain shows, because I mean, all the shows we listed by Norman Lear, like, I watched at some point in my life. I mean, Maude, Sanford and Son, like, I used to love Sanford and Son.
I'm having a heart attack.
And then, thinking about it now, I'm just like, wow, they really were pushing the envelope, but they were doing it in a way to start a conversation. And I feel like now people are so afraid to have that conversation, because we live, I mean, we've talked about this on the podcast more than once. We live in a cancel culture now, and it doesn't seem to be waning in any way. It just seems like people are just waiting for you to say the wrong thing, and they're just waiting for you to do something wrong. And when you do say the wrong thing, you're not allowed to like defend yourself. You're not allowed to because if you do, you look more guilty. And
again, I'm not defending anyone or anything they've done or posted or whatever. A couple of examples that I can think of recently, and again, I'm probably going to get the shows wrong, and I'm not going to name names because I don't remember who they were and what, but I think it was maybe The Bachelor, and one of the Bachelorette contestants that was trying to date and, get engaged to The Bachelor, I think she was in a sorority at a university and had gone to a fraternity's spring formal that was famously called Old South. So Gone with the Wind, plantations, Confederacy. And she was photographed, which is unfortunately still tradition, in antebellum dresses with the hoop skirts and the ruffles, very Scarlett O'Hara. And people went ape shit over those pictures. And I mean, they were probably, I'm going to make this up again, the timeline. So this might have been 5 or 7 years ago.
Okay.
And the pictures that she had taken were 4 or 5 years before that.
Okay.
So she was maybe 20 or 21 when she took them. Should she have maybe thought about it? Maybe. But she was asked to a fraternity formal. Again, maybe the fraternity shouldn't have been having an Old South semi-formal. They had that at my college when I was in college there. I was never asked to it, but I have friends that have posted those pictures on their social media because it was a party that they went to.
Right.
There were other things that happen on particularly reality TV shows. Again, I just referenced The Bachelor or The Bachelorette. When you were talking about cancel culture and saying just run one wrong thing or having an old tweet come up. I mean, we were just talking about X and Twitter while we were watching Smosh, and I was like, I don't even know what my Twitter login is. I don't think I've logged into Twitter.
I deleted my Twitter account long ago.
Well, since it changed over to the new branding, I have not logged in. I need to delete it.
Twitter X has always been, before it was X, Twitter's always been a cesspool. So I mean,
it was stupid for me for people fighting on Twitter. I'm like, go talk in person. Like, what is this? But anyway, so that's where I think Norman Lear started. He wanted it to be a conversation where we could say, like, this is stupid, this is silly, we should just be together and accept people. But what you and I just talked about is where we've come. We're still not there yet.
All right, you want to get into the pilot summary?
Let's do it.
All right. After running a chain of successful dry cleaning stores, the Jeffersons have become financially successful and have moved from working-class Queens to the luxurious Upper East Side of Manhattan, or Manhattan, as we kept saying when we were in New York.
Manhattan.
They are beginning to settle in when Louise Jefferson meets Diane Stockwell. They met downstairs in the laundry room and have struck up a little friendship. Louise invites Diane up to her apartment for some coffee. The Jeffersons' British next-door neighbor, Harry Bentley, comes outside and introduces himself to Diane. We find out that Diane isn't a resident, but is a maid for one of the building's tenants. We then find out that Diane assumes that Louise is also a maid that works in the building. Mr. Bentley is confused by this, but is interrupted by Louise, who invited Diane inside. Over the course of some funny exchanges, we see Louise continue to not realize that Diane thinks she is the Jefferson's maid and not a Jefferson.
Right. Not the owner of the apartment.
Louise's husband, George, comes home and introduces himself to Diane. Diane, still unaware, assumes that the Jeffersons must have a lot of money to afford a live-in maid and butler.
That's hilarious.
Diane is finally told by George that they are the Jeffersons. So Diane gets really embarrassed. She realizes she's been talking to a wealthy resident and not a maid, and Diane tells Louise she has to leave, and they most likely can't be friends because they live in different worlds. It seems the money and status have immediately gone to George because he agrees with Diane, but Louise believes that they don't have to look down on people with less money just because they're wealthy now. Diane ends up leaving. George tells Louise that it's a simple fact of life. She is a resident and Diane is a maid. They are in different social circles now. Louise reminds George that not too long ago they were living in Queens in a working-class neighborhood. George says it's not about where they're from, but where they are now. The only thing this conversation accomplishes is it inspires George to hire a maid to work part-time so Louise will no longer have to do housework. Louise is resistant because she doesn't have much to do now that they've moved to Manhattan. It's just really interesting that, like, just even a small example like this really just kind of proves that, like, money can buy you things, but can it really buy you happiness? Like, I think a lot of people are like, if I have enough stuff, it'll make me happy. I'm like, will it? You know, I'm just always...
Oh, no. I mean...
You know what I mean? Like...
I mean, there's always the joke, like, money can't buy me happiness, but it can buy me a car to go out looking for
runner,
it. Yeah, you know, whatever it is, so...
The next day, the Jeffersons' neighbors, interracial couple Tom and Helen, which, by the way, is the name of my aunt and uncle.
Yes, it was. We both Helen looked at each other. Yeah. We were like, oh...
Tom and Helen Willis are hanging out with Louise having coffee. They are discussing George's need for a maid. He has already called the employment agency, and Louise will be conducting the interviews. Helen calls out Louise and says that her real issue is her fear of spending a lot of money on something she doesn't technically need, which I think would be a difficult thing for me, honestly, if we ever like won the lottery or something like that, because I've just always been so frugal my entire adult life. It would be so hard for me just to be like, even if I had all this money, it's like, let's get this thing that's $10,000. I'm like, it's $10,000.
Well,
I would just still be...
Mine is, well, also the same. I grew up relatively, I'm not going to say poor. We were not destitute, but we did not have a lot of money. I'm also not big on like jewelry or fancy cars. Anyone listening to this knows that to be a fact.
Right.
So like going out and buying jewels and 5 cars just would not be the thing for me. Like for me, maybe building like a real nice outdoor patio.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
But
yeah.
That's like for me with this generation is like watching those like people, those influencers do their hauls. I know it's probably a lot of free crap that was sent to them.
Oh yeah.
But when they're showing also rich people getting ready to go out to like a Christmas party and they're like Chanel and Yves Saint Laurent and David Yurman, and they do the total at the end and they're like, this one outfit that I have on was $75,000. And I'm like, what?
Why?
Like,
yeah.
Okay. I'm like, and so anyway, yeah, you and I are very much alike. That's why we would go on our 6-week long cruise fest and see the world.
And I would still be looking for deals, and I would still be looking like, and that's the whole thing. I still wouldn't get the alcohol package. Like I still, you know what I mean?
We'd have our 6 free drinks a day.
Yeah, well,
4 free drinks.
Well, we better be platinum by that, or what? Pinnacle, or whatever it's called. Royal Caribbean. If you just want to automatically update us, you can.
Yes, sponsor us.
Upgrade us. I mean, not update us. All right. Yeah, Louise admits that she can't help it because that's the only life she knows. A lot like us. She's been budgeting and penny pitching her entire life. Louise says she's only bought 3 types of dresses. I love this. She only bought 3 types of dresses, 50% off, seconds, and going out of business. Helen assures her that she will get used to it, and she only needs to learn 3 words. I'll take it. Louise responds with, she only knows 4 words. How much is it? Which is probably what our 4 words is, how much is it?
Exactly.
She then admits that she thought having a lot of money would solve all of their problems, but her and George have fought more in the last week than they've had in the last 20 years. Money can't buy happiness, that's what I'm saying. In fact, I mean, you could argue that money sometimes makes your life worse.
Oh, yeah.
I remember being really bummed out one time listening to an old Smoshcast episode where he was like, the suicide rate of lottery winners is higher than you want it to be.
Well, that
like,
or you hear about the lottery winners who get scammed or who spend all their money in like 5 years and then they're flat broke.
I mean, you think you're going to win all this money. It's infinite. It's like, no, it's not infinite. That's not literally an infinite amount of money. It is, you can run out of it. You don't have revenue like Jeff Bezos or someone who like runs a company that's constantly getting revenue. You're just getting this lump sum of money, and that's
every
it.
single day.
Yeah.
Like Jeff Bezos probably makes like $100 million a day.
Right.
I'm making that up. I don't know how much. It's probably more.
You know what? If it's more, I wouldn't be surprised. All right. George comes home and is immediately dismissive towards Tom and Helen. It's very clear that he doesn't support their interracial marriage and makes jokes about them. This is kind of talking about the political and social commentary. George is about to kick them out before Tom tells him that they agree with him about having a maid. Now Tom and Helen are George's best friends. He loves them now. He wants them to stay and hang out. George and Louise begin to argue about getting a maid when their son Lionel walks out. Is it Lionel or Lionel?
I don't remember.
Okay. Yeah. Walks out of his room. Lionel casually says he has someone in his room. That's someone being Jenny, Tom and Helen's daughter. She walks out the room, and her and Lionel pretend to have a fight to show George and Louise how annoying they're being. That was actually really cute.
It was funny.
Louise is a bit surprised that Tom and Helen aren't disciplining their daughter for being in a bedroom with the boy, but George says it's because they are scared to fight. This is when the racial slurs start coming out, because now George implies they're scared to fight because he knows that if they start to fight, then one of them is going to call each other a racial slur because they are an interracial couple. But Tom and Helen are like immediately offended by this, and they end up leaving. They get into a little bit of a argument with George, and then they leave. But then they have a really sweet conversation outside of the apartment, and he was just like, we would never say that to each other, and it was a really sweet moment. The next day has arrived, and Louise and George are waiting for the potential candidate to interview. There's a knock on the door, but it's not the new maid, but George's mother, Olivia, or Mother Jefferson, as they call her. A woman who is very critical of everything Louise does and constantly defends George no matter who is in the wrong. Olivia is appalled that George is getting a maid, but then changes her tone once she realizes that Louise agrees with her, which was such a typical mother-in-law sitcom moment. She's like grilling George about getting a maid, and then Wheezy's just like, oh, no, I agree with you. She's like, oh, well, you could probably go for, having a maid wouldn't be so bad.
Except your mother-in-law loved you probably more than me. My mom
That's not true.
Oh my God, she used to talk shit about me to you.
She's so sweet. I loved your mom. She was my original Tootie.
Yes.
The potential new maid arrives, Florence Johnston, played by Marla Gibbs, who I will always say this, American treasure. I'll always say that. She's the best. We need to do 227 at some point in time, because I loved that show. George is impressed with her punctuality and mentality of not wasting people's time. Despite Louise's attempts to make Florence look unqualified, she is unsuccessful. Florence is a perfect match for them, because she kind of, she'll kind of sass back at George and probably to be on Louise's side about stuff. Diane from earlier comes to the Jeffersons' home and recognizes Florence asks what she's doing there. She tells Diane that she's hopefully going to be the new maid for the Jeffersons, but then Diane is offended that Louise didn't offer her a job. Louise tells her that they're friends and thought it would be inappropriate. And she was just like, turns out that Diane is the maid of Tom and Helen. Helen sent Diane to the Jeffersons to apply for the position to earn extra money. Florence tells Diane not to worry and to take the job, insisting that she will find work through the agency, which Florence ends up becoming their maid, right?
Yes.
Okay. Before Florence leaves, she looks at Louise and Helen. Both are African-American women like her, and verifies that they both live in the high-rise apartment. Mainly, she's just confirming that they are both wealthy black women. When they say yes, Florence replies with, "Well, how come we overcame and no one told me?" The four women burst into laughter.
Yeah.
End of episode. I was kind of waiting for what the last line was going to be, and it ended up being that it actually made me LOL.
Yes.
It was actually really funny. I'm going to be honest, I'd keep watching this.
It was really good. And again, I'm going to admit,
so well written.
At the time, I probably wasn't into the social commentary that was there. I knew that those words were wrong, and I was not allowed to say them. Obviously, the racial slurs and things.
Yeah.
I'm also trying to think about the whole interracial marriage. At my age, that was another thing that I've talked about, in the sense of, my mother has told me stories that when she first came to New Orleans, I'm Hispanic. My parents are from Central and South America, and my skin is obviously very olive tan complected. I don't think, maybe it's because I looked at my mother my whole life. I don't know. Maybe I see her differently. I never thought of my mom's skin as dark as mine. I always felt she had fairly tan skin. Not nearly as tan as mine, for sure. I remember her telling us about stories when she would be going to work, that in the buses, it would say colored and non-colored in the front, colored in the back. And when she first moved here, she would go to the back because she thought she was colored because she was Hispanic, and white women would make her move up front because they thought she was white. And so I remember she was very confused coming to the country, because she was just first off, I didn't understand why there were separate areas for people, which is obvious.
Right. It's insane to even think about. Yeah.
Right. So that is kind of how I also will say that I grew up sort of in this. I'm never going to say that I was oppressed or anything like that. But one thing that I will say was, growing up, and again, any of my very small childhood friends can tell me if I'm wrong, I was really one of the only Latin girls in my school. There were white boys and girls, black girls and boys, but there were not a lot of Hispanic kids. And I just remember always feeling where do I fit in?
Right.
Really, honestly, as a small kid, I did not see a lot of people of my color. And I'm not going to go into I felt bad or anything, but I do remember seeing that as a thing.
Yeah.
Not truly understanding it, of course, and issues that people felt.
You say you don't want to say it makes you feel bad, but being excluded is going to make you feel bad.
Correct. Yeah. And so, I've talked to my sister about it and stuff, because we also had very different kind of educational experiences, where she grew up and was in school in the late 60s, where I didn't start school until the mid 70s. So she was going through a lot of the civil rights things, desegregation, busing. And so those were really hard times for her.
Oh, yeah. All right. You think that about wraps this one up?
I think that wraps it up.
All right. We done good. Happy anniversary.
Happy anniversary, boo.
Well, that about wraps up this episode of We Judge a Show by its pilot. Thanks for tuning in. If you haven't already, go ahead and follow us on whichever platform you're listening to this podcast on. That way you'll be notified every time we publish a new episode. You can also follow us on Instagram at We Judge Pilot Pod. We're also on Facebook. You can leave us a comment, suggest a show for us to watch, or leave some emojis in the comments. What you got?
All right, I don't have too many. First off, since tomorrow's New Year's Eve, I have any of the champagne or party hats.
Okay.
But for the Jeffersons, the Statue of Liberty for New York, the laundry basket since they're dry cleaning business, the crown because they were moving over from Queens, the cab because that's in the credits, that's driving them to the new apartment complex, any of the cash emojis, the bills, the bag of cash, the dress, the bride and the groom for Tom and Helen, and then just any of the family emojis because we have, George and Wheezy and Lionel, Tom and Helen and Jenny.
Yeah.
You have the neighbor, Mr. Bentley. I mean, all of any of the people emojis. All right. Well, I think that wraps it up. We're going to head out now, but we'll talk to you soon. Thanks for listening.